Welcome to The Disruption Is Now. Join us on this enlightening journey as we explore how AI is impacting our jobs, careers, lives, and the human experience. Each episode, host Greg Matusky will converse with visionaries and innovators at the forefront of AI, diving into its challenges, opportunities, and impact. So buckle up as we venture into the heart of disruption, and together, let's unfold the future.
Welcome to another episode of The Disruption Is Now, the podcast for all things AI and how it impacts human communications. I'm your host. I'm Greg Matusky. I'm also the CEO of Gregory FCA, a national public relations firm. And I'm joined today by Michelle. She's a PhD and is the co-founder and CEO of Zhou, which is a Silicon Valley-based firm which really focuses on developing cognitive artificial intelligence assistance in the form of chatbots. She's taking a totally different tact than the typical chatbot, and that she's really an expert in human-centered AI. And I'm interested in going into that to understand what that's all about. And that's really the intersection between AI and human-computer interaction. She's authored more than 100 scientific papers. She has a PhD from Columbia University. Before she co-founded this, she had worked for IBM at the Watson Group, where she managed the research and development of human-centered AI technologies. Michelle, thanks for being with us. Did I get that right?
Thank you, Greg, for inviting me. Yes, you did get everything right.
Let's talk a little bit about this idea of human-centered AI. What's your perspective on that? How does it differ from what we do today on ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini?
So the concept of human-centered AI, as you mentioned earlier, it's really at the intersection of artificial intelligence and human-computer interaction. So what it means is that we actually started by understanding people and individuals and groups and trying to understand how humans behave and what they wanted to achieve, what they wanted to do, and then use that understanding by empowering computers to help people do more and do better, right? Very simple example. So let's say we understand that everyone, individuals, have their own motivations, their goals, or their passions and interests. If we can understand that, then we can actually use computers, model computers, to understand each person at scale. Because we often say that everyone has a talent, and maybe everyone is born with a talent, but many people may not even understand and may not even have discovered their own talents. So computers can be made to help people discover their own talents, their own passions, their own interests, and then help them to find the right path to utilize, to maximize their talent, their potential.
So does this really incorporate human psychology? I mean, what other disciplines do you have to bring into this? And that's something that always interests me about AI, because to understand it, I think it's a real nexus between many different disciplines. There's psychology, there's neuroscience, there's linguistics, there's computer science, data science. I mean, for me, I'm a professional writer. That's how I started, Michelle. And that process always fascinated me. And then when I saw generative AI, my jaw just dropped. I said, finally, I can teach others, because they're not going to be so absorbed by the syntax. They're not going to be so absorbed by the language, but rather the where they wanted to go with creating a message or a narrative. So where did you begin with the human experience part of this?
It's a great question, Greg. You're absolutely right. In order to actually making machines more human-like or better help humans, we have to actually bring many different types of disciplines together. So for example, we use psychology, especially in our way, we call it computational psychology, almost like a computational biology, and trying to understand people better, understand their psychological characteristics, right? Understand their way of thinking, their way of behaving. So this is from a psychology. If we wanted to use computers to help people better interact with other people, then that would be social science part of it. So using social science to understand, to better actually model human to human interaction behavior. It's a social science, right? So once you use those kind of what I call the humanity part of science to understand humans better, then we can use computer science in potentially mathematics, statistics to better model the machines to understand human behavior. So there's really many disciplines at play together to create what we call it human-centered AI. So you can think about one side, you want to use those science to understand humans, understand their behavior, model their behavior. Another side it is to use the understanding to model computers. Then you put them together, put one to one together is greater than two, of course, to actually empower machines.
And is that the alignment as they refer to it? Is that what they're talking about when they say alignment with the machine, or am I mixing things up?
I'm not sure. This alignment could mean many things, right? So in our world, in our very actually a simple word, doing this one, it is really you can think about it is you're trying to create or be empower, we call it machines with human skills, then to help humans better, right? Another example. So in at the GG, because you're talking about cognitive AI, so one of the things we use a very simple word to help people understand what cognitive AI is. It's basically the branch of the AI, right? We are doing here it is to teach machines with advanced human skills. So let me just give an example what human skills. One of the human skills it is we call it reading between the lines, right? So when a psychologist is interacting with the humans, the psychologist tries to observe, tries to listen, tries to read between the lines to figure out who this person is, what this person like, what motivates this person. So what we're trying to do here is first one, trying to understand what the psychologists are trying to do, how they model human beings. Then we teach machines the similar skills. So when a user is interacting with our AI agent or AI assistant, the AI agent and assistant can read between the lines to figure out who the person
Well,
is.
this notion of reading between the lines, it's very important in what I do in the storytelling craft for clients and companies, because it's often what the client can't say or doesn't say that's the most important part. If they could articulate it, right, they really wouldn't need me. So that reading between the lines and what I do is very important. And when you hear certain tip-offs, like they go, we haven't really developed an elevator pitch yet, or we keep changing our positioning, our branding, right? That is one of those between the lines where you got to understand why is that? Why would a company be in movement like that? So I think that's really important. And then this notion that I read about active listening within the machine. And I always say one of the most compelling aspects of AI is it gives us what we really want. And that is it listens to us, right? It's concentrating on us. It's not thinking about, oh, I should walk the dog, or, oh, the dinner's getting ready, or formulating the answer while I'm speaking to it, right, before I'm done. It listens and then responds. And that kind of listening is something I think we all innately want in a partner or an assistant. And so go into the active listening of this and what you've found to create more cognitively aware AI chatbots.
So actually, you said something just mentioning about the generative AI. people call it large language models behind the scene of generative AI, right? So the current state in a typical generative AI type of agent, it does listen. So for example, like you said, it listens to your command, your prompt in some way, right? Then responds. But that's not active listening. So what active listening is, it listens, but actually tries to actively participate in the conversation. So I would say that large language models on their own, they're passively listening. So passive listening, which means it is like whatever, just like in our conversation. If you ask me a question, I just answer, but I'm not going to trying to go to a next step. Active listening, it is like I was trying to do. I said, as you just said, that's listening, but not active listening, right? Active listening is trying to really instead of in addition to understanding what my actually conversational partner is trying to say, go to the next step, either to explain or to ask the question or to show my empathy. Okay, so for example, this is a very big difference between active listening and just listening. So let's say because we are working with healthcare organizations and educational institutes.
Take me down those. Take me down that path, right? I want to learn. This sounds like it has profound implications in counseling, in coaching, in mentorship. The active listening portion of this,
Absolutely.
right? Because
Absolutely.
right now, if you go on AI models for behavioral health counseling, right, you really don't get much more than you could have done in the old world. You could have found these answers. There were databases that you could have inputted questions to, and it gave you output. So take me down through those applications, because this is the difference maybe between me catching up with my wife and me having a real heartfelt conversation about where we stand in our relationship or how we feel about things. So help me understand that, Michelle.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So let's just give an example of education, right? So in our way of active listening, it's really we call it proactively respond, proactively guide. It's a part of the active listening action behavior. Very simple example. So when you go to not so active listening, let's say AI assistant or AI agent, let's say a prospective student who wants to consider whether they can afford to enroll in a particular program, academic program, right? So the questions the enrollment, the recruitment specialists often got it is, my biggest concern, it's about the cost, which is true, right? Because getting a degree, even getting a certificate, could cost somebody literally thousands of dollars, right? So he said, okay, that's my top concern, right? So a regular, that if it's not so active listening, be more passive, and AI would say, got it. I understand your concern. It's about the cost, right? Mm-hmm. But the active listening AI, what we call the cognitive AI assistant, would take a step much further. We said, oh, I understand your concern. It's about the cost. Do you know that? We offer a number of financial aid options. Not just stopping there. Would you like to actually have me walk you through the various options to see which option might be the best fit for your situation? If the person say yes, it will actually engage in a next round of a conversation, asking the person, hey, are you a full-time, describe your current status. Are you a full-time employee, or you're active military personnel, or are you a veteran, right? So do you see? It tries to really listen to what the person's concerns might be, and actually provide the solution and provide options to help the person better assess what kind of help he or she might even get, right? So it goes to a next step of the one. So that's the biggest difference. You can take a step back to say it is, I just saw somebody actually from MIT is doing maybe a podcast too. They were asking, what's the future of LLM, which is a large language model, which is the generative AI? And the person was talking about it is, it's really the proactive help, proactive guidance part of it. So active listening, it's never passively listens and responds as is. It always goes to a next step. If you look at the active listening literature, it's about how you can better engage, better the communication. So if the communication is just kind of almost like what do you call it in in the hockey, just pass the about. It's not going to stop there, right? It's going to actually coming back talk to you to say, hey, like in an example of just talking about, I hear you, I understand your concern, to be very empathetic, but also actively proposing, actively guiding the person to the next step.
Well, I'll tell you one area that we work in a lot, Michelle, where this would be profound is in financial services, wealth management, because all these companies come up with processes, systems. They sell their system, right? Mm-hmm. But the hardest part about that is really getting a client to share with them their real concerns, because wealth is so much tied up in identity, right? The person with the nicest car might be the one living paycheck to paycheck, right? You don't know. The person driving the 10-year-old pickup could be the real multimillionaire. He or she, the family has a family business and does very well. Their perspectives on money are very unique to one another. And the relationships in the family, there's some members who don't know, some members who do know. There's the wife's expectations, the man's expectations. My wife, she's my CFO at home, right? You would expect me to do that. I run a business, right? But she has both the time and the talent and the interest to do that. Now, I don't care if I share that with you, but maybe some people would care to share that with you. And trying to read between the lines of those factors is very difficult when it comes to family wealth, family relationships, how they're going to play out, who's going to be a part of the decision making, right? So I would see, and every model you see in AI, I have to tell you, basically is a form that they've taken that you fill out, right? What's your property? What's your value of your company? What kind of life insurance do you have? But there's none of that reading between the lines, or may I say intuition, right? That I think you're trying, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're working to install in the machine, that intuition. And that is one thing. I read your notes that you sent over from what surprised you most about ChatGPT when it first came out. And what surprised me was that there's so much information in language. I just thought that you really can't get that much information from language. The way we consume it, the way we learn, we're multisensory, we're social, right? We have conversations that we learn a lot from. But it seems as if, for some reason, there's a lot more information in language than we assumed there was, right? And but that reaches a point, right? You start to see the same kind of behavior from AI. If you're a heavy user of generative AI, you start seeing the same kind of things over and over the more you use it, right? Which tells me that there is a limit, that it's not really seeing through, it's not sentient, it's not human, it's not seeing through to me, right? But it's a great help too, and a great tool. But that's what I see as the limit right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, add to it.
I think you actually just a minute ago, you gave a very excellent example of about limits of the current generative AI versus what we're working right now, about really empowering machines or AI with more human advanced cognitive skills, right? So you mentioned the reading between the lines is very important. And actually, the active listening and the reading between the lines are go hand in hand. So in order to reading between the lines, like in a conversation, you want to prompting your conversational partners to say more, asking follow-up questions, and trying to actually drill down on the details and specifics, like in your financial example, which is really great. So for example, people said, oh, I'm not the person who managing the finance in our family. So it's a really active listening. AI would say, oh, that's interesting. May I ask you who will be that person? You see, right?
And even
And
more,
then
why is that person? Why have you chosen that person?
why is a person? So
And if you would
so
ask that
this
question, you would gain such insights into the nature of the relationship all of a sudden, right?
and also the dynamics of the family,
Exactly.
right? How's going on? So in this case, as I said, it goes hand in hand. So first of all, you want to engage the conversational partner. You want to actively listen. So active listening is one of the very effective engagement, human to human engagement skill. People often use in interviews, in counseling, in many, many different types of conversation situations. So once you do that, now you got all those information and you want to process that information. That's why we're talking about reading between the lines, trying to infer what is the real message this person has not said yet, but actually it's implied already, right? So for example, when you listen to this message, we're trying to also deduce, infer, oh, actually this person is a very family oriented person. He cares deeply about his or her family. Or versus somebody is a very self-empowered person. He or she will make all the decisions on their own. You see?
I
That's a
see.
big
Yeah.
difference. Even though people maybe said the similar content, but it's how the way they said it, right? That's why we use this line of the technology, line of the discovery called the psycholinguistics, which means when people say something, it's not about what they said, it's how they said it, to infer people's underlying psychographic, we call the psychological characteristics. So
I'll
they,
give you an example from my own life because I do a lot of
mhm,
financial services. And when I was
yeah.
doing my estate planning, I was meeting with lawyers and I was meeting with wealth management people, and they all said, "Well, how do you want to control your wealth after you die?" And I said, "I
Mhm,
don't." And they said, "Well,
mhm,
you have to think about this." They weren't asking me
mhm,
questions; they were telling me, "You have to really think about this." What do you
mhm,
mean? They go, "Well, you
mhm,
know, uh, you want to take care of your children, after you die, perhaps, but there's risk with that." I'm like, "Well,
mhm,
look, I got a son. He's married to a doctor. I think they'll do pretty well. They're pretty smart people." And they go, "Oh, did you know that like a single medical malpractice case could wipe out their wealth?" I'm like, "Where are we going here, folks? I mean, my job is done. I spent my life trying to manufacture fully functioning human beings. I've entrusted the world to them now. I really don't think I want to control their lives now or after I'm dead. I mean, trying to control your children's lives after you're dead, that because they didn't ask those questions, right? And instead, they just continually gave me risks, right? I just
mhm,
shut
mhm,
up. I mean, it was enough. They
mhm,
just
mhm,
didn't
mhm, mhm,
understand the dynamics
mhm,
nor the relationships of my family. And I think what you're talking about is a whole nother level. I'm going to change gears for a moment, and I want to really go into this because I speak with people all the time who tell me that
mhm,
AI should be capped, should be limited in some ways, and it
mhm,
shouldn't
mhm,
be imbued with all the characteristics of the human experience because of the dangers that would come with that. And I always think, you know, we shouldn't give them the good and the bad. We shouldn't give them the yin and the yang. Like compassion, right, is there because we know bad things happen in the world, right? And without the machine realizing that bad things can happen, will it be compassionate, right? Will it really so far the fate of humanity hasn't been extinguished. Maybe it will. I'm a very optimistic person, and I always think maybe if we imbue the machines with more human characteristics, we'll be safer in the future rather than just make them our slaves, as we do with most tools, most animals, most tools. Most tools are just something that we see benefit or productivity from, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting. First of all, I'm with you. I'm also on the optimistic side. So first of all, AI is just like other tools. In the human history, we humans have created, right? So, but of course, we don't know yet if AI could have their own autonomy completely, right? So far, I don't believe it. I have been working in this area for 25 years, and I haven't seen that type of behavior yet because I'm working with AI every day. My complaint is AI is still too dumb and it's not going to behave at a level we even expect a 3-year-old to behave. Okay, so it's far away from that. However, on another hand, AI does have its characteristics which are superior to humans, right? So, for example, AI can exhibit what in my term it is a level of empathy. Empathy, which means it is they will show that they feel what you feel, kind of give you that kind of illusion, but without the emotional burdens. Thinking about the counselors, thinking about the emergency EMT workers, they actually, so I read many literatures which show that people in that line of the work, they are subject to burnout. Why did they subject to burnout? It's not just about the hours they're working, not about the burdens they have. It's really about emotional burdens because they've seen so many tragedies, so many like disasters. So they have to bear it in their mind, right? That's a human nature. So because they share that emotional burden, they share that kind of basically they when they see the trauma, when they see the kind of unfortunate thing events, they also actually emotionally be burdened. Machines don't have that problem.
That's a great point.
Machines do not.
That's a great
Yeah,
point,
machines
Michelle. I've
don't.
never heard that
Yeah.
really brought up. The emotional trauma and burden that comes from some of these roles that we as humans perform. Go,
Right.
keep going
So
on
in
that.
that case, yeah. So in that case, because I often give talks at universities, some university students brought at the problem from a different angle. They said, "This Michelle,
Right.
machines don't even have emotions. How can machines show empathy?" And I said that's actually the opposite. Somebody, the machines do not have the emotional burdens, but can still exhibit empathy, which is actually I would consider a plus because they will never be burdened by the emotion. So this one going back to your original question. So do we want to teach machines everything? So do we want them to be burdened by emotions we humans have to endure? That's because of our biological makeup. But machines do not have that biological makeup. So in that case, I considered separating machines from humans. Maybe it's a good thing, which means it is we don't want to make machines everything human, but in a selective way, right? We want them to exhibit a certain human behavior, certain human skills, but without burdening them with the everything human have to endure, human have to be burdened with. So that's the way I would say machines. I would treat machines still as tools, but do certain things that the humans have a difficulty of doing or cannot sustain in that type of tasks.
Well,
So
I do this podcast mostly to learn. And I just learned some really important points from you today. And that last point about the
thank you.
dichotomy between emotions and compassion is really powerful. My daughter's is a counselor, a family counselor, and one area she doesn't do is personality disorders because she says that's very difficult on counselors. These people have such an ability to flip reality that even a counselor can't protect themselves from that. And a counselor can fall into their alternative universe, if you will, of everyone's wrong, they're right, and be empathetic to some of their worldviews, which are distorted. So I think that's really profound, that if you separate, right, the emotion from compassion, you can be more compassionate because you don't fall prey to those human triggers, which either withdraw us, which is what counselors have to do in those cases, or traumatize us so we can't effectively counsel in the future, perhaps. So that is, I plan to use that in the future when I run into those very questions. This has been very enlightening. I want to thank you for your time today. I get so much from these podcasts, Michelle. This one I really rank high as far as going deeper than what I usually do. What I'm usually talking about is language and how it can help with that process, or brainstorming, or even workflows. But this was on a whole nother level, and it was really insightful. And I want to thank you for taking the time to be with me and my audience, and congratulate you for what you're doing. I think you're really advancing the cause of the human-computer interface and symbiosis. So continue on, and thank you again.
Thank you, Greg, for having me. I'm glad that we are having this opportunity to talking about those kind of very interesting topics.
It is interesting, and it's an important topic, and it's one that I get asked by people who've never used AI a lot of questions. And the thing I always say to them is, if you were to go to a conference, some of the smartest people in the room would be asking the same questions if computers could emulate human beings. And they do it almost as if regretfully they're not informed. And I always say, oh, no. I sit with some of the most intelligent people I know, and they ask the exact same questions. So I appreciate your time in helping us learn more about what is a strange new world, but it's wonderful and it's weird, and I look forward to the future. Thank you.
This podcast is a production of Gregory FCA. If you enjoyed our discussion today and want to continue exploring the transformative power of AI, please check out more episodes and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.